Hello and welcome to this week's online children's session. We're in week 5 in our Words of Hope series. So far we have looked at
fulfillment,
kingdom
and cross,
and grace. And this week we are looking at the word
covenant.
What does the word covenant mean, Victoria?
Well, there's something about a promise or an agreement when we think about a covenant. It might help us to work it out just by reminding ourselves of what kind of covenants we might have, what kind of agreements we have. So, for example, when I was teaching, I had an agreement or a covenant with my class that they'd get golden time, some time that they could choose what they wanted to do, as long as during the week we got the stuff done that we needed to in the classroom.
When a man and woman get married, they make some promises to each other. Sometimes we talk about this as a marriage covenant.
And in our family, when we got our dog, we had promised each other, we had an agreement, we had a covenant that we were going to share the walking of the dog.
In some families, children get pocket money, but they only get it if their behaviour has been good enough or if they've done a number of chores. You could say that's a covenant, an agreement they have for their pocket money.
Well, today we're going to look at a covenant between God and someone in the Bible. There are a number of covenants in the Bible, and we're going to look at one of those today.
Now we're going to give you some clues. It's someone from the Old Testament. Can you guess who it is? The first clue is that it is a man.
Narrows it down a bit. The second clue is that this man lived after Noah, but before Moses.
The third clue is that when God made his agreement with him, his covenant with him, he was a really old man. He was actually older than you, Victoria.
That old? Wow, thanks Andy. The next clue is that he was married. He was married to somebody whose name began with an S.
And his name began with an A.
And God changed both of their names at some point in his story.
I wonder, have you guessed who it is?
It is Abraham!
And we're going to watch a little bit of his story now.
So this is where we are in the story.
God made a perfect world, but people messed it up. God started the whole earth over again,
With an enormous flood.
but he saved one guy and his family, and everything was good again. But after lots and lots of years, it seemed like not much had changed. People were still selfish,
Still mean.
and the world still wasn't how God wanted it to be. So God decided to fix everything that had gone wrong.
With one very special family.
That's where Abram comes in.
Abram was an old man. 75. That's old.
Before Abram even knew who God was, he heard him speaking to him.
God told Abram to leave his home and go to a new country.
Imagine if God told you to move far away, like tomorrow, to Canada or Uzbekistan. Well, Abram did it.
He left his home and went where God told him to go.
And God told Abram that he'll make them to a great nation.
Which was a big deal because a great nation meant lots of kids.
And grandkids?
And great-grandkids.
But
Abram didn't have any kids.
Remember, he was 75.
And that's pretty old.
And his wife, Sarai, was 65.
Kids never ask a woman how old she is.
So God's promise seemed kind of unlikely.
Not just unlikely.
Impossible.
but Abram believed.
So he waited and waited and waited some more. For almost 25 years. And when Abram was 99 years old,
God told him again
that he would have a son.
And as part of this promise, God changed Abram's name to Abraham. And Abraham's wife became Sarah.
So Abram was now Abraham.
And Sarai was Sarah.
As a way for them to remember God's promise to them.
The promise that they would have a son. God even told Abraham what to name his son.
Isaac.
And God said Isaac would have 2 sons of his own.
Abraham's family would keep growing
And growing.
And growing. Sarah still had a hard time believing this.
She even laughed at God.
She was 90 after all.
but God always keeps his promises.
And a year later, Isaac was born. And years later,
Another special baby was born into the same family.
His name was Jesus.
have you heard of him? But just think,
If Abraham had stayed home and ignored God,
maybe none of that would have happened.
But that's another part of the story.
Abraham's part of the agreement was to obey God. In Genesis chapter 17 and verse 1 and 2, God says to Abraham,
I am God, all-powerful. Obey me and do what is right. I will make an agreement between us. I will make you the ancestor of my people. So in that verse we hear Abraham's side of the covenant, the agreement, and God's. Abraham's side was to obey God and do what is right. And God then promises to make him the father of many people, to make him the head of this massive family.
in this agreement, God promises to make Abraham's family, even though he's old, into a massive family, to bless the family, and to give them a special place to live.
The trouble is, though, that we see Abraham's family couldn't keep their part of the agreement. They broke it. So often in the Bible we read the story of God's people not being able or choosing to disobey rather than obey, and to do what wasn't right in God's sight rather than what was right. But you know, it wasn't only in the Old Testament and in the Bible stories we read. It's right through to today. Through history we see people not being able to keep this part of the covenant. Me as well. I don't keep that covenant every day.
But God was so committed to this agreement, to this promise that he'd made with Abraham, to bless his family and through them to bless the people of the whole world, that he sent Jesus, who could come and fulfill the promise himself, who could come and keep his side of the deal, who could obey God and live a perfect life.
So Jesus is the agreement keeper.
The covenant keeper.
Yeah, and Jesus is the great grandson of Abraham. He is part of Abraham's family. And because Jesus is the only person that can keep that covenant, the one that keeps aside on our behalf, it means that we can then be part of that family through faith in Jesus.
We can enjoy the blessings that were promised to Abraham in that covenant agreement. We can enjoy looking forward to a special place where we're going to be with God forever, where there's nothing sad and nothing bad. There's a really helpful verse in the book of Galatians that helps us to understand this idea of covenant from Abraham's story.
Let me read it to you. It's Galatians chapter 3 and verse 29, and it says, "You belong to Christ, so you are Abraham's descendants. You receive all God's blessings because of the promise that God made to Abraham."
And what a promise it was. And Jesus kept that promise. And so by faith, actually, we could say that Abraham is our great grandfather. And we can enjoy the things that God promised to Abraham because Jesus is the great covenant keeper and we have put our faith in him.
That is covenant. Have a brilliant week, everybody. We'll see you soon.